What's going on, guys? Carmine here, and I just got done watching the episode a second time, and I've got to say, episode 5, Eastwatch, has got to be one of my favorite episodes of the season so far, hands down. Random weird shit aside, it flowed nicely in some places, and the dialogue was great, and we were given more of what we've been asking for stuff to happen, and it did. One of the biggest complaints people keep throwing at this show for some reason is that nothing is happening. Well, this is the episode where things needed to happen to be moving into place for the finale, and it accomplished that nicely. Once again, there were issues here and there, but at the same time, these can be easily brushed aside because of what we did get was good enough to not let it cast a shadow on the episode as a whole. Unlike episode 4, where the first half was and the second half was great, this episode was entertaining throughout the whole thing, and so far it's tied with episode 3 for my favorite, but I'm sure the next two will challenge that. As always, the next episode of the Game of Thrones podcast will be out later this week, so look forward to that, and anything I don't discuss here, we'll discuss there, but for now, let's get to the review. First, let's start with Sam and Gilly. Now, normally, I would roll my eyes and throw up in my mouth whenever they come up, but I'm willing to give these two a pass this time around because they weren't as terrible as before, and Gilly has been kept to a minimum this season, so it's fine. There wasn't much going on with them this episode other than Sam likely heading towards Winterfell and taking some of that secret knowledge with him. I will say, with how everybody is teleporting all over the place, I'm surprised he didn't somehow magically end up at Winterfell already, or maybe even Eastwatch. I hate how his time at the Citadel was cut short and seemed wasted, but with 7 episodes, I can understand why, especially his frustration with the lack of anybody doing anything. But he served his purpose there, and has done more than enough this season, but still, I did expect some cool Maester stuff from his scenes this season, and it's a shame we didn't really get any of that. But these two this episode weren't really in it too much for me to care or hate, but it almost feels like this is the last time we'll be seeing Sam for this entire season. I do hope I'm wrong because if you combine him with certain characters, Sam can be very interesting, and I would like to learn more about the Long Night and the White Walker abilities and whatever else he can give us, but we'll just have to see. But let's find out what you guys thought about it. On YouTube, Carlos says, Gilly revealing that Rhaegar and Lyanna got married is the biggest fuck you to Carmine I've ever seen. It really is, because it takes something I've wanted for so long and a character I just hate and combines them together. It really is not just a fuck you to me, but every book reader for that information to be glossed over like that. Let me explain. If you just watch the show, then the info Gilly dishes out doesn't mean much to you, and understandably so. The topic of Rhaegar isn't as big as it is in the books, so it doesn't mean much to, people who aren't book readers. But to us, it is a very big deal for them to drop it like that. From Gilly. It really is almost like a fuck you to book readers. Especially me in general, since I hate her. Having the worst character give important plot details that is crucial info in the books is a really ballsy move, but I love it at the same time. I love it because it is so ballsy and such a fuck you that I'm impressed they're actually doing it. And Sam's ranting and not paying attention was icing on that douche cake. Mwah, I loved it. But I've been waiting to see, you have no idea how just frustrated I am, because I've been wanting a Rhaegar and Lyanna vision from Bran for such a long time, and if you're familiar with my channel, you know, I have a Sam and Gilly hate video, so this really does seem like a big fuck you to me, but I gotta give it a pass because it really did make me laugh. And I will say, if one thing this episode did right, it was be funny the entire time, so it gets a pass on that. But my god, what was that? I'll go into a bit more detail in the podcast, but to sum it up, ever since Season 5, there has been bits and pieces of book story content that has seeped into the show that we weren't supposed to know, but kind of spoils the books a little. Last season, it was the Hodor hold the door stuff, and this time it was the Rhaegar Lyanna stuff. It's small, but just enough in your face to stand out, and it does seem very spoilery if you've been waiting for those books, so I can only hope they don't spoil too much anymore in the episodes to come, but we'll have to see. Now let's talk about the Lannisters and their scenes, which were my favorite this episode. Bronn and Jaime somehow surviving the field of fire was fun, even though Jaime should have sank to the very bottom with all that armor he has on. Jaime and Tyrion were also great, and I did want them to continue talking a bit more, but it was the right amount of time focused on them for the current situation. I also really love both Jaime and Cersei together. The fear in their eyes of what Dany's dragons can do, how Cersei is desperate to see her side as the one that can win, and as the only option for the country, their scenes were just fantastic this episode. And the inclusion of Bronn, who hasn't got much screen time but has made really good use of it, was also great. No complaints here whatsoever. I also like how Cersei dismisses Olenna's claim that she was behind Joffrey's death, but I feel like a better argument for her would be to imply Tyrion regardless, because they did work together to overthrow Cersei. And who could have expected that she and Jaime would be parents again, despite the prophecy that she'd only have 3 kids? The one thing I will say is kinda dumb and I hope is cleared up is the whole scorpion thing. Jaime said the scorpion didn't work, but it did. Cersei is very much in the game still, she just needs to build more of those, and I'm glad they discussed how Dany just used one dragon to mess him up, and how she has 2 more in reserve. Good stuff overall, but let's see what you guys had to say. On Twitter, Katie says, do you think Cersei is actually pregnant or just trying to pull Jaime in closer? I didn't consider that at first, I just took Cersei's word for it, that she was pregnant, but good on you for knowing her way better than I do. But yeah, this could be a ploy to lure Jaime closer towards her. I'm sure many of you listening right now have seen this before in person. That friend or loved one who lies to you about something just to pull you in with sympathy and compassion. It's not above Cersei to do this, and in the books we get a glimpse of it too, how she manipulates Jaime and how his mind is all about pleasing her and making sure she's happy. It makes his actions later on in the books very interesting and such a far cry from his current storyline. Him finding out that she deceived him would put him on that path, but the argument against this could be that she doesn't need to do this. Yeah, Cersei is paranoid and she wants to make sure she can keep the only person she trusts on her side, but Jaime has proven his commitment time and time again, so I don't think it's bullshit to control him. But I would love it if it were like the case, so hopefully it is true. It just makes her relationship with him more fucked up and even more tragic. Now let's head on over to Winterfell, where arguably it is the weirdest and least interesting this episode. We get Peter Baelish trying to maneuver around, Bran trying to scout out the Night King's army, which in my opinion was the best thing about Winterfell this episode, and Sansa and Arya's disconnect, which came out of nowhere. I also love how the Lords of the North are so fickle with who they support. Jon has been gone for a while, and already they're saying they should have supported Sansa? This could be a diversion by Peter, okay fine, but at the same time, I can't really see him manipulating the Lords of the North as easily as he could the Lords of the Vale. Not only that, but Arya this episode, what the fuck was that? Where did that come from? How dare the Lady of Winterfell settle in the room where the Lady of Winterfell would normally be in? That was so random and out of nowhere, but let's talk about Arya, and oh, hold on, I'm getting a phone call from my YouTube manager. Hello? Yeah, I'm doing the review now. Dude, I don't want to do that, what every other YouTuber does. This is my review. Alright, fine, I'll read the email. Arya was the greatest character this episode. She was amazing and awesome. I can't begin to tell you how awesome she is in this episode, and how well written she is and totally not awful. She is my 5-root character. Anyways, moving on. Now let's get to the Fellowship of Winter, who are scattered throughout the episode. First in King's Landing with Davos and Gendry, who is finally back. Yay! It's about time, and good on the showrunners to include that line about him rowing the entire time. Always good to see a meme in your favorite show, especially a small one. I will say though, Gendry, even though I'm a Baratheon fan and I want to see him as Lord of Storm's End, he is possibly another of the weakest points of this episode as well, and it's not because of what he says or does, but how rushed it is. It's so rushed. We just get introduced to him and like 2 minutes later he's already off. The guy has less than 5 minutes of screen time, and already he's done more than half of the other characters this season. I just wish he was reintroduced last episode, or even maybe last season. And personally, I would love a bromance between him and Jon Snow that would mirror the Stark-Baratheon friendship we've seen before. As for Jon and Dany this episode, I will say this. I've given Emilia Clarke so much shit for her mediocre acting skills. She's not that great. And people who are given less screen time, like Alfie Allen and even the Hound, are way better. But this time around, she was absolutely adorable with her interactions with Jon. Having her crush on him and, like, you know, being it so apparent was, I don't know, it was well done. Even though it makes no sense to me, and I don't want them to get together, and you guys know this, I don't ship Jon and Dany. Fine. But if her material given to her this time around was, you know, to obviously show that she has a crush on Jon, okay, fine. I'll take it. It was nicely done. I'm trying hard not to like it because it just doesn't make any sense. But I'll take it. Whatever. Fine. Whatever. Leave me alone. As for Jorah, Poor Jorah, he is king of the friend zone. By the way, in case you guys didn't know, the reason he was given grayscale was because the actor wanted time off to film a role for the final Resident Evil movie, which by the way was awful, but I'm glad to have Jorah back. I do miss him and I like the character. He does add more depth to Dany's group, and he's always an interesting guy to have around. Him and Jon teaming up, I feel is like such a slap in the face, because Dany's interest in Jon and how Jorah always seems to have a front row seat to watch the next guy take her from him, it's just, I don't know, it's just such a slap in the face to Jorah's character. Davos this episode was Davos, you know, he was just there. I like how when they needed to smuggle themselves into King's Landing, they all looked at him. That was nice. Like Jorah, he is always a pleasure to have around. And as for Jon, his plan sucks. If you saw my preview video for episode 6, then you'd know it makes no sense. Okay, they want to capture a soldier. There's no way they can capture a White Walker soldier. That would be too insane, a little awkward, and just not possible. You gotta get a white. Okay, fine. But the whites that were brought into Castle Black were dormant. Bran told you the army is on the move. There aren't any stragglers running around if they're all moving together. The plan would make more sense if the episode wasn't in such a rush to finish, and they took Bran with them to scout ahead and try to find one of them who has broken off from the group to capture. That would make more sense to me. You know, have Bran continue his Raven Wargang abilities to, you know, pick off some targets. I get that Jon is in a hurry and all, but they don't even stop at Winterfell just to check in? That's a little insane, but understandable. They are in a time limit. Eastwatch, by the way, looks absolutely fantastic. I love the design for Eastwatch by the Sea. It really does look awesome, which is funny because Eastwatch, which I didn't expect to, see this season, looks way better than the castles we all expected to see this season, like Casterly Rock and Highgarden. You kidding me? As for Tormund, once again, he has barely any screen time, but just like Bronn, I love him every time I see him. The Hound, Beric, and Thoros, we only saw them in episode 1, and I'm glad, because they're one of those characters who you don't need to have to check in with every episode. My favorite part of this episode has got to be, even though it was short, the whole jail cell scene where they're all together and everyone in there has history with each other. Someone on Facebook said it reminded them of a college humor skit, and that's exactly why it's so great. I really wish they would have kept that scene going for more than 3 minutes. But even though the pacing here was a little off and the entire episode felt rushed in some places, with some weird decisions being made, it was still a good episode. I understand a lot of you guys disliked it for one reason or another, but I usually judge these based on the entertainment value and how much I was not bored by any of it, and I was really hooked for the most part. It was very funny, which is always a plus for Game of Thrones. This episode was designed to give us a breather from the chaos of last week and set us up for the dreaded episode, which hopefully will be just as great as it has been every single year. But guys, that is all for today. Leave your thoughts below in the comment section and tell me how you felt about this episode. Also, keep in mind that the next episode of the Game of Thrones podcast will be out later this week. If you're supporting my channel over at Patreon, you will have access to it first. And don't worry, everything we didn't cover in this review will be covered on the podcast. But, as always, thank you so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and hit that subscribe button for more, and I'll see you all next time. Baba Booey.